Okay, well, thank you. This whole thing is stunning because it's been a personal journey since I was a medical student at Yale during the New Haven riots and the Bobby Seale Black Panther trials, when the issues of inequality really came to the fore, that you just can't allow inequality to go on. And it's been a driving force from a lot of my life. To be here today is actually quite stunning, and sort of a theme for how was a phone call a couple of months ago. Let's have a meeting, and we end up having a meeting. It's really the power of purpose and partnerships, and it's partnerships that really, really matter. It's partnerships of equals, not someone telling someone what to do, and we in the West know everything. So it's really just amazing to be here. I could spend the next 2 hours thanking people who have been involved in that. Part of the deal for this meeting is we have the CVs in the book so you can read who we are, and then we'll get down to business with like action verbs. So this is who I am. I'm paid, I have a paying job. I work for the National Cancer Institute. This work I do for ICEC is not part of my group. It's a allowable extramural task, outside activity they call it. And as people heard me say before, if they don't pay you any money, you can't have a conflict of interest. So I have no conflict of interest. It solves a lot of problems when you don't get paid. Okay, so this is what I'll talk about, and basically the outline. So the topic, I was either given that or I took it myself. It's a great topic. Why global oncology should obviously matter. I'll talk about what is the target for global oncology. Why might global oncology be considered a low priority by some? So what are the challenges we're up against? So you take this complex problem, how do you dissect it and put together a solution set? I'll talk about some stuff that a lot of things are in place that you may not be aware of. And what I hope in this talk, you'll get a sense of how many things are really there to help us move forward. So what we learn from science and for operational response, what we can learn from other disciplines for which failure cannot be an option. For global health and people getting no care, failure is not an option. We have to solve that. How do you broaden stakeholders and participant lists? It's a very complex problem. In some ways, the solutions dwell in the complexity because there's a lot of ways of addressing that. And one of my favorite new concepts I talked about, leading edge and trailing edge science. So I learned a few things for this. I learned how to use Excel spreadsheets. So I spent about 2 or 3 days taking a lot of data from the 2016 WHO report on global health, and I put them into Excel spreadsheets, and I learned how to make bar graphs and pie charts. So you can teach an old dog new tricks. So these data are more or less correct. And what I use for the measuring disparities is the causes of death, though there's a lot of metrics you can use, but they all sort of run together. So almost 9 million people die of cancer each year. Probably at least 50% should be cured. Is that okay? So oncologists, which is a lot of us, have treating cancer as their career purpose. So that people going without care is a terrible thing. It's just not tolerable. Current standard therapies, we know how to use them. We know how to teach. We know how to make them in guidelines. We know how to do this. And oncology has been a leader in global partnerships through cooperative group trials, international studies. So we know how to do this. So why global oncology should obviously matter? I mean, this is it. So that's it. That's my talk. Okay. So it should obviously matter because global oncology is something that should happen. But it should be that easy, but it really isn't. So the rest of this is trying to dissect why it doesn't happen and how we can go about making it happen. So who are the target populations? And you can look at this geographically. You can look at this by WHO, World Bank regions. And we talk about the low-income countries or low and middle-income countries. And it's a transition from low to low and middle and low and middle to upper middle. So we have some of these divisions. But if you look at the part of the world that has low-income and low and middle-income countries, it's about half of the world can benefit from the kind of things we're doing. There's a lot of folks out there who really could use this. So you're looking at it by World Bank region, You look at it by geographic regions, obviously they overlap. That's a big chunk of the world that really needs things done. But there are places in addition to these that have health disparities too. But there's a lot of people who could really benefit from what we're doing. So you need good metrics, and one of the best metrics, again, as a mathematician, as one of my math professors said, as a mathematician, the least I can do is count. So radiotherapy machines are a really good way to judge disparities because radiotherapy is a critical part of cancer care. So we focus a bit on radiation, but we're talking about the whole totality of cancer care. But without radiotherapy machines, you can't do it. And when you have a radiotherapy machine, you have a physical enterprise that you can build other physical enterprise around it, like offices and molecular diagnostics and things like that. So radiotherapy is a good metric, and there's some places in Africa where it's red and the deep orange where there's absolutely no machines at all. There's no care at all, nothing for a country. And what tends to happen is we do surveys, and next year we do a survey, and we find out that one machine's not enough. So you have to do action verbs. So the 7 issues I'll consider of why people don't pay attention to global health are here, and then I'll go through those quickly. So the first argument is there are other diseases we need to take care of before cancer. Second, infectious diseases are a threat to us. So why don't we deal with that? And it's a threat to us in the West because we worry about epidemics coming to us. So we tend to prioritize things that can affect us. It's too expensive, and poor places can't afford it. Do you look at that shortage? This is a disaster. It's just too hard and too big to fix. So we just ignore it as being too big. The infrastructure is awful. You can't have healthcare and you can't have technology. It doesn't earn revenue, so it's bad for my career, and et cetera, because I'm sure I'm forgetting something here. So we'll try to take these one at a time and show how these not only can be addressed, but they are being addressed. So the first are, there are other diseases we need to take care of before cancer, and infectious diseases are a threat to us, so let's deal with that. So you can see on the bar graphs, the 2 on the left are global, and that NCDs, when you look at the orange and the gray bar graphs, for low and middle income countries and upper middle income countries, non-communicable diseases far outnumber infectious diseases. Okay, so we're not competing them, but there's plenty of them. And in fact, as low and middle income countries become upper middle income countries, cancer becomes even more prevalent. So what often happens is in healthcare and outcomes research, a lot of things, we look at the problem as it was and we solve the problem as it was. And I think a better way to solve a problem is see where it was, but also preempt where it's going to go, so that as low and middle income countries get richer, they're still going to have cancer, and it'll be even a worse problem. So there are infectious diseases. We're not in competition with them. There are NCDs, but cancer's in second place, so at least we're visible. Competition for investment is a real problem. We understand why it's that way. There's an immediacy in infectious diseases, and I'll show you in a minute that same immediacy exists actually for cancer care. A good deal of investment in global health and many other charities, to say it nicely, are often about the person who's supporting the charity. People like their names and they like to get recognition, and that is absolutely perfectly fine. So there's a lot of branding that goes into what someone decides to take on as a challenge. And I think it's something we can capitalize on, but also understand how to deal with that. And as I'll show you, there's more in common in etiology. Some of the major diseases in global health are infectious diseases that create cancer, for hepatitis, HIV, and HPV. So a lot in common. So the next question was, it's too expensive and places can't afford it, and it's an overwhelming number. So as we heard already, the Global Task Force, supported by the Lancet Oncology Commission, did a major report called the Expanding Global Access to Radiotherapy. So the Global Task Force had Rafida Toon, David Jaffrey, and Mary Gospodarowicz. So to read their conclusion, and they have a lot of data that support this, our results provide compelling evidence that investment in radiotherapy not only enables treatment of large numbers of cancer cases to save lives, but also brings positive economic benefits. Great data, it's the truth. Okay, there's something to aim for. you don't argue with this for a couple of reasons. One, if you ever dare argue with any one of these three people, you'll be really sorry. And if you ever take all of them on at the same time, you're nuts. So they asked Bruce Minsky and I to write an editorial, so we did. The verdict is in. The time for effective solutions for the cancer burden is now. So there are data supporting what we're about to do. Of course you need metrics to measure what you're doing, but you don't need survey after survey after survey to say that one radiotherapy machine is not enough for a country. So you get the data and you begin to operationalize response. The next thing is that the infrastructure is awful for healthcare and for technology. Well, yes and no. And here's where there's incredible opportunities. So in low-income countries, and again, folks who live in those areas know that LICs become LMICs. I mean, progress is there, there's infrastructure gets built. So there's a natural progression. The World Health Organization projects that low-income countries will eventually be a thing of the past because of improvement in economics. We're talking about a market share for products when you talk about technology. There's a huge market share for technology. Half the world, as I showed you on the map, is where you can sell and market and utilize all these things you're developing. There's a thing called mHealth, again, which people in practice are aware of. It's mobile computing, medical sensing, communication technologies for healthcare. You can send people out in the middle of nowhere and know what their blood pressure and pulse and things in are. They developed those for the Department of Defense, and these things are available now. Where a pioneer program is being done is in Rapid City, South Dakota, with Dan Petterite, who's one of our board members, who's doing this work with American Indians. Telecommunications and teleeducation are there. A pioneering program, chart rounds with Patty Hardenberg. And the picture on the top was the first of the workshops that we had. You probably heard of CERN. Okay, if you discover the Higgs boson, do you think you can help invent a new linear accelerator? So we have a group of us working with CERN and the DOE and physicists from UK to potentially invent new linear accelerator, new technology that's meant to work in those environments. So technology, materials, computing, person-to-person innovation are opening up new markets and resolving infrastructure issues. So the bottom line in this is disruptive, reverse, and catalytic innovation will produce new products and markets. And note one thing, the two people on this slide are private practitioners, okay? There's a wealth of talent in the private practice sector that we do not tap into. We think it has to come from academics, and that's not the case. And these are major drivers of new ideas. So addressing some of the issues, as I mentioned before, is low and middle income countries become upper middle income countries, infectious disease go down, the bars on the top, and cancer goes up. So people have seen my awful diagrams, and we have a poster of this outside too. But the chart on the bottom is to show the time course of when you have to intervene in infectious diseases on the top row, non-cancer NCDs in the middle row, and cancer on the bottom row. So what cancer and infectious diseases have in common is you need molecular diagnostics, you need imaging, and you have to do something right away. You can't kick that can down the road. For the other NCDs, it's mostly prevention strategies, and only when prevention strategies fail do you have to then do medical intervention. So just looking at that, cancer has a lot in common with both infectious diseases and the non-cancer, non-communicable diseases. So you can focus a lot of your intervention around that. There's an urgency of intervention. The science matters. A lot of infectious diseases and cancer have very, very many things in common. And again, the infrastructure you needed for those, for cancer with a treatment and diagnostic is the kind of infrastructure you need for infectious diseases as well. So infectious diseases and cancer need urgent intervention. You can't kick the can down the road. And people do infectious diseases and they ignore the NCDs, and you just can't do that. The next thing you want to do is have a big tent. So people say this doesn't earn money for your career. Well, you modify your career. So you broaden the definition of what it is you do for your career. And the change, as you can see from this meeting, the change occurs from the bottom. This is bottom-up change. You cross-train, you get different degrees. So you get MPH degrees, you get a business degree, you get something economics, you get computer science. So what you do is part of your healthcare is you bring other talents into that. As you see from ICEC, we have a number of expert panels. And the paper the picture on the bottom is for one of my papers called Masters of Our Destiny. And you know it was an important paper because it was completely ignored in the radiotherapy literature. The whole idea is that academic departments, the little things in the top, are there to just publish and move ahead. But there are models that can link academia and community practice. When I was in Boston, we in fact did that. So we know it works. So how do you bring those kind of partnerships together? You broaden the tent, you bring people together, you cross-train. And you merge ideas and you merge things together. The other thing, and we talked about it in the beginning, this is a fourth industrial revolution. Machine learning and AI are going to take over what we're doing. Anybody who thinks what you're doing today in healthcare is what you're going to be doing 5 years from now is wrong, and 20 years from now is going to be completely different. And sometimes using markets that you can get to easily, like underserved, you can make these changes and then bring them back in. So there's another group of experts, and some of in this room. So I work in emergency preparedness, and we actually created a new discipline called CBRNE, Medical Operations Science Support Expert. So John Kerner, who's with me here, and Monique Mansoura, and the third person, Maria Julia, a bunch of us put together a whole new approach to emergency response, and you can see the various steps along that way. So in preparedness and response for health and medical incidents, we cannot fail. Okay, you have to have a response. So you put together all this, the spectrum of things. All disasters are primarily health and medical. When a bomb goes off, where's my wife and where's my dog? And you worry about where your building is later. They're all health and medical. And the kind of thinking that you need to generate a response for a terrorism or emergency incident is the same kind of things we need for doing for health care. So we need to how to do this. A nuclear incident, which is what I deal with, is basically a cancer incident. You have to know how to manage cancer. So there's a lot of stuff that's already been done, and the U.S. government knows how to do really, really well that we can import into how we do global health. So the other question is who cares? And right now, most people in this room don't have cancer. A lot of people have cancer, but I don't have it today. So if you look at the incidence of cancer with the blue bars, and you look at the world population with the orange bars, and you put them together on a graph, you don't see the blue bars, okay? Because so few people today actually have cancer, so it's not really visible. So I did one of my bogus arguments. It's not entirely bogus. So there's probably about 9 times as many, there's probably 9 survivors for every 1 person with cancer. So you take those cancer incidents and multiply them by 10, okay, a lot more people. You get the bar graph on the lower left, you can barely see the blue bar graph, okay? Then you say, well, let's multiply that again by 10. Every cancer person has someone who they know, they connect with, or they work with. So can you increase that number by another 10? And now you can begin to actually see the blue bars. You can see there's a number that people can look at that's actually happening. So what you want to do is you want to get increased advocacy for your cause by involving people who can potentially worry about this. And advocacy is really important way to get things to grow. The other way you broaden stakeholders, you look at the technology and the science of what you do, and how does the science and technology of cancer care relate to other things? And I won't go through this in detail, but we did a paper called Radiation Rotary. It's the idea of what of radiation sciences impacts fields other than cancer care, and it impacts nuclear security, it impacts fear of radiation, it impacts technology. So all these things link together. So there are people who are involved in radiation become interested in what you're doing. So we met with a bunch of people at a physics meeting at CERN when I gave a global health talk, and one of them came up to me, a physicist, said, I can invent a linear accelerator for you. And we have physicists now really engaged in with things we're doing because no one ever asked them, they never introduced them to that. So you want a big tent. And the partnerships we've started in government are shown with all the little symbols on the right, the Health and Human Services, we have NIAID, Allergy and Infectious Diseases, DOD, Department of Energy, NASA, CERN, all these groups are involved in global health, so you begin to increase the size of your tent. Then the next thing you do is do it. And when you do global health, you have to define success and failure differently. So when I was at Harvard, 1996 and 98, I traveled a lot, and we decided to set up a program in Kathmandu, a teaching hospital, and there's me with a beard. I used to be sort of a hippie. And we had land donated for us. We had this program ready to go. We had some money raised. It was me giving a talk. I actually could speak enough Nepali. I gave this talk in Nepali. It was to great amusement. I have no idea what I was saying, but it wasn't that bad. So we tried to do this. We had land, we had everything ready to go, but it failed for various reasons, which is not the subject of this talk. But you go out and do it. I remember when I came back to my friends in Nepal, I said, gee, we failed. They said, you didn't fail. The fact that you even cared, that someone of your stature cared about our country was a great success. So you get out there and you try. And interesting, I know maybe Partners in Health people are there. I know Paul Farmer, and we were doing this about the same time Paul Farmer was starting his Haiti program. So there's a lot of history, and you go out there and you try to do it. Okay, so here's you're going to see some great workmanship from me on a computer. So let's put together the system and program that can demonstrate why global oncology matters and make it happen. I won't tell you how long it took me to do this. Okay, so we have diseases we're dealing with. That's the basis. Infectious diseases is NCDs. The one NCD that covers both of these is cancer. We need expertise. We need people. We have students. We have trainees. You're allowed to do global health until you get your first job, and then you can't do global health until you retire, like a 60-year gap. And that's sort of ridiculous. So, but we have models to know how to do that. So expertise is there. We have to empower that to happen. There's research and development, there's academia, there's industry, there's grants, entrepreneurship. We try to expand the scope to beyond healthcare. We use technology, innovation, AI, and you get funding and support. You need visionaries, you need donations, you need entrepreneurs, you need grants. And what you accomplish is the things in red around the circle. So you take care of cancer care that includes NCDs. You develop disruptive innovation, you change the way things are done. You do reverse innovation, you learn from people on the ground. You do catalytic innovation. You take the stuff and you actually apply it. And then from the bottom, you develop a unique career path, which is a part of this meeting. You develop novel practice models. You capture lost wisdom, what we call purposeful health span, novel health systems delivery, broad societal uses of radiation, and world peace. This is a way to bring the world together as well as getting rid of dangerous nuclear material. There's a thing called, I like leading edge and trailing edge. NCI invests $5 billion in leading edge science. If we invested $5 million in global health, 0.1%, if we had for this program, we could do an enormous amount. And if you don't take care of trailing edge, you have the price of inequality, which is what's really disastrous in the world today. So you heard some of these before. It's always impossible until it's time, from Nelson Mandela, Margaret Mead quote. John F. Kennedy applies to this. We chose to go to the moon in this decade and do other things, not because they're easy, but because they are hard. What we're trying to do here is hard, and these are the challenges you really want in life. We have the cancer moonshot, and all we got to do is make it the global cancer moonshot. So this is what we're trying to accomplish. The solution is expertise. The need for global oncology is mandatory. Of course, it matters. There's nothing I talked about today that not only can we do, but that's actually already being done. So we can do this. The fact that we're here with the vision and we've accomplished this far means we're on our way. This is really a first step in that direction. So look at this, cool, huh? So ICEC, it's about expertise. It's about ICEC. And I hope this is a sort of a day to sort of remember. So we're bringing the hearts and we're bringing the minds together today. The people who have this and that passion, and we're bringing about ways of getting this done. So I hope we remember Valentine's Day, February 14th, 2019, as a pivotal day for global oncology. It's about power of partnerships and purpose. Thank you very much.